She thought she was only speaking to her memories, until the night her lost lover answered back. But what if love returned to her in a form no living heart could endure?
The Love That Returned, written by Second Hogo.
Night was descending upon the city as if the heavens themselves had extinguished their last candle, leaving only the ash of twilight to smolder above the crooked roofs. Within the confines of a modest apartment, whose walls had long been stripped of laughter and whose windows stared blankly upon the indifferent street, there dwelt a woman named Sarah. She was not old, and yet her spirit bore the heavy wrinkles of grief, those invisible furrows that sorrow plows into the heart long before age has conquered the flesh. She sat by the window, though it opened not onto a landscape of stars, but onto the gray solitude of gas lamps flickering in the mist. Her eyes, vast and dark, reflected a perpetual vigil, for Sarah was one of those whose gaze no longer sought the world outside, but rather dwelt upon the invisible theater of memory. There, in that secret stage, she beheld a figure whose absence was more palpable than any presence, Arman. He had been her companion, her beloved, her future. Yet death, that insatiable thief, had stolen him in the cruel anonymity of an accident. It had been swift, brutal, and absurd, leaving her with nothing but a silence that resounded louder than any cry. To live after love has perished is to inhabit a house that still stands, yet has no door, no fire, no breath. Sarah wandered its corridors day and night, not with her feet, but with her soul. She would recall his laughter, so rich and disarming, and then the memory would turn upon her like a dagger, reminding her that never again would the air tremble with that sound. She would trace with her hand the contour of the pillow where he had once slept, and the fabric seemed colder than stone. She would whisper his name, Arman, and the echo would return not from the walls, but from the emptiness of her own chest. Her neighbors, those casual passers-by who share the same building, yet not the same fate, remarked upon her pallor, upon her withdrawn ways. They muttered that she lived in the past, that she should recover, that she should learn to smile again. But grief is not a garment one casts aside at another's bidding. It is a second skin, fused by fire, and to strip it is to strip away life itself. Sarah endured the pitying glances, the well-meant consolations, and returned each evening to the sanctuary of her solitude, where she alone could commune with the phantoms of her memory. Sarah did not know it then, but grief was about to be transfigured. The abyss into which she had fallen, black and unending, was on the verge of revealing not only its depth, but its hidden passage. Fate, which had once robbed her of love, now conspired in silence to return it, though in a form neither living nor entirely dead. The threshold between worlds was thinner than she imagined, and soon it would part like a veil. For love, that obstinate force which mocks the grave, was not yet finished with Sarah. It was upon such a night as poets imagine and madmen fear, when the sky itself seemed to hang suspended like a torn shroud above the earth, that Sarah, seated once more before her window, felt the old weariness of her heart swell into a kind of delirium. The rain tapped against the pane like 1,000 imploring fingers. The wind groaned in the chimney as if the heavens bore within them some inarticulate grief. She clasped her hands together, whispering into the void the name that had become both prayer and curse, Arman. The syllables dissolved into the darkness, yet the darkness did not remain mute. A strange hush spread through the room, as though the very air drew back its breath. Sarah's pulse quickened, her skin prickled with the sensation of unseen eyes. She turned, and at first she thought it was her own reflection in the mirror that trembled before her. But no, the figure that slowly defined itself amid the shadows was not she, but he, Arman. Not in flesh, not in the radiance of the living, but in the trembling pallor of a spirit. His form was both luminous and indistinct, like a flame seen through water. His features were sculpted in memory and fog. His eyes, once a deep ocean of warmth, now shone with an unearthly clarity, as if every sorrow of death had been distilled into light. Sarah gasped, rising from her chair, her whole being shattering between terror and desire. She wanted to flee, yet her feet clung to the floor as if roots had grown from her grief into the very boards. Tears welled at her eyes, not of fear alone, but of recognition. She whispered, "Arman, is it you? Or am I gone mad at last?" The apparition raised a hand, not solid, yet not without force, and in that gesture was the echo of 1,000 caresses. His lips moved, and though no sound crossed them, her soul heard what the ears could not. "It is I. I have not ceased to love you. Not even death could command me away." She staggered forward, arms outstretched, but when she sought to touch him, her hands closed upon emptiness. The agony of that void was greater than all her years of mourning. She sobbed aloud, "If you are real, if love has truly conquered the grave, then why do I suffer this cruelty? Why are you here and yet not here?" The specter bowed its head, and his silence was heavier than speech. At last he answered, and the words seemed carried upon the tremor of the air. "Because I am not free. My death was no simple passage. There is a chain, a shadow of injustice that binds me still. Until it is broken, I cannot remain. I come to you in fragments, like a dream half remembered, because love alone permits me this mercy. But the hourglass diminishes. Soon even this thread will be lost." Sarah sank to her knees, clutching at her breast as if to cage the heart that threatened to burst. Her voice was a plea torn from the very marrow. "Then tell me what I must do. Let me be the hand that breaks your chain. I would walk into fire. I would embrace the abyss itself if it brought you back to me." A faint light trembled through his form, as though her devotion nourished his very being. He gazed upon her with eyes that held both adoration and sorrow. "There was an injustice, Sarah, a truth concealed at the hour of my death. Find it, unveil it, and perhaps I shall stand beside you again, not as a shadow, but as a man. Until then, we are condemned to this cruel threshold, neither parted nor united." She reached again, though in vain, her fingers cutting the air. Yet this time, as if pity stirred in the beyond, she felt the faintest pressure upon her hand, like the brush of a wing. It was not touch, and yet it was more than emptiness. She wept, clutching that phantom contact as though it were the very substance of life. Outside, the rain ceased, and the silence grew deep. The city, ignorant of this miracle, slept in its sordid dreams. But within the chamber of Sarah, eternity itself had cracked open. The dead had spoken, the beloved had returned, and the gulf between worlds now lay trembling upon her fragile hope. Thus began the great ordeal of her heart, to wrest from mystery the key to love's resurrection, and to defy once more the cruelty of fate. Days passed, though Sarah no longer counted them as mortals do. Her hours were measured not by clocks, nor by the rising of the sun, but by the fleeting apparitions of Arman. At times he came to her like a pale reflection on the glass of night. At times only a whisper trembling in the silence. At times nothing but the scent of rain where no rain had fallen. Each visit was both ecstasy and torment. for with every encounter she drank of love, yet tasted the abyss that still divided them. It was in this twilight of existence, half among the living and half among the dead, that another presence entered her life. His name was Daniel. He was a colleague of hers from the library where she labored, cataloging the dust of forgotten tomes. Daniel had long harbored a quiet admiration for Sarah, the kind that blossoms unseen, like a flower in darkness. He watched her, not with the frivolous desire of youth, but with the tender awe of one who beholds a wounded angel and longs to guard her sorrow. He had known of her tragedy, as all the city whispered of it, yet what stirred within him was not pity but reverence. Her grief, her silence, the fragile dignity with which she bore her loss, all this wrapped her in an aura that seemed almost sacred. He began to linger by her desk with excuses of work, to carry for her the heavier volumes, to inquire after her health. At first, Sarah accepted these gestures with distant courtesy. Her soul was elsewhere, chained to the spectral figure that appeared to her at night. But slowly, like ivy creeping upon stone, Daniel's devotion wove itself into the fabric of her days. He would speak to her of books, of the old poets who sang of love stronger than death, unaware of how close his words touched her hidden reality. Sometimes, when she allowed herself a smile, so rare, so fragile, it struck him with the force of revelation, as if heaven itself had opened for an instant. He began to dream, not with arrogance, but with a desperate hope, that perhaps he might heal her, that perhaps her heart, though scarred, might yet beat for the living. But Sarah's nights belonged to Arman. One evening, when the ghostly presence returned, she confessed, "There is another, a man of flesh and breath, who shows me kindness. He does not know you, Arman. He cannot know. What am I to do with his devotion?" The specter's visage darkened, not with jealousy, for what jealousy can the dead claim, but with sorrow. His voice trembled like wind through a broken harp. "He is of your world, Sarah, while I am of none. His footsteps sound upon the earth, while mine are bound in silence. If you choose him, you may live again. If you choose me, you choose the shadow. Yet love is not a choice, is it? It is the chain that binds us both." Her tears fell upon the floor, invisible to both. "You are my soul," she whispered. "I cannot betray you, even for life itself." Yet fate, ever cruel, tightened the knot. Daniel, emboldened by the gentleness of her manner, resolved to speak his heart. One dusk, beneath the dim lamps of the library, he took her hand, not forcefully, but with a trembling reverence, and said, "Sarah, forgive my boldness. I know your heart has known sorrow deeper than words, but I cannot bear the silence any longer. I love you. If there is any place in your life for a man who would dedicate himself wholly to your happiness, let it be me." The words struck her like a storm. She withdrew her hand, pale as marble, her lips quivering between gratitude and despair. She answered with kindness, but firmness. "Daniel, you are good, too good. If the world were empty, perhaps I could belong to you. But my heart is already claimed, by a vow that not even death could sever." He stared at her, stricken, yet he thought it no more than the stubbornness of grief. He believed time would heal her, that patience would win. He did not know of the shadow that watched them even then, unseen in the dimness of the shelves. Armand's spirit, whose gaze burned with the anguish of an immortal love imprisoned. From that night, a silent conflict began. Daniel's devotion grew fiercer, more desperate, while Sarah's loyalty to her phantom beloved deepened with every spectral encounter. She was torn between two worlds, the tangible affection of a living man and the spectral bond of one returned from death. And in this crucible of love, hope, and despair, destiny prepared its cruelest design. The nights grew heavier, as though the heavens themselves conspired to press their weight upon Sarah's heart. Each vision of Arman sharpened, each whisper clearer, until one storm-laden evening the impossible occurred. He stood before her, not as a shade, but as a man of flesh, his hand warm, his eyes luminous with mortal fire. She trembled, reaching forth in disbelief, yet when his palm closed upon hers, no mist dissolved him, no void reclaimed him. Arman had crossed the chasm. "How?" she gasped, her voice breaking like glass. He pressed his brow to hers, his breath real against her cheek. "The chain of love you would not sever drew me back, Sarah. Death itself relented. I am yours, not in dream nor in shadow, but in the fullness of life." For days that followed, Sarah lived as though in a dream of paradise. They walked the rain-washed streets together, spoke of futures once denied them, and her heart, long embalmed in sorrow, now beat with rapturous vigor. Even the gray of the city seemed gilded. She dared believe that grief had been conquered, that destiny had surrendered. Yet, in the margins of this miracle, Daniel's anguish fermented. He had seen Arman, alive, inexplicably alive, and the revelation shattered him. He had thought Sarah haunted by memories. He now saw she was haunted by truth. His love curdled into something darker, not hatred, but a desperate refusal to be erased. The world, he told himself, could not be so unjust as to restore the dead and condemn the living to solitude. One twilight, as Sarah and Arman departed the library where Daniel had lingered, their joy unguarded, Daniel stepped from the shadows. His eyes burned, his voice trembled. "Tell me, Sarah, what enchantment is this? What cruel trick? How can the grave release him and not every soul we have buried? Answer me." Arman placed himself between them, his voice calm but resolute. "It is not for you to question the mysteries of heaven. What was torn from us has been restored. Let us live, Daniel. Leave her in peace." But peace was beyond Daniel now. His hand, trembling with fury and despair, clutched a blade he had carried in secret, as though some dark premonition had armed him. He had not meant to use it, yet grief is a madness, and love, when spurned, a fever without cure. "Peace?" he cried. "Where is peace for me? She smiles upon you, spectre returned, and upon me she bestows pity. I have loved her in silence, in patience, in devotion, and now, when I dared to hope, you steal even the crumbs from my soul." Sarah, pale as death itself, stepped forward. "Daniel, no. Listen, you are dear to me, but my heart is not mine to give. Put away the blade, I beg you." For a moment, the storm within him faltered. But then Arman drew her close, and in that embrace, Daniel saw not tenderness, but triumph. The madness returned. His arm thrust forward. A cry split the night. It was not Arman who fell. The blade had found Sarah. Her gasp was soft, a fragile bird crushed beneath unseen wheels. Arman caught her as she collapsed, his hands drenched crimson. Daniel staggered back, horror dawning too late, the knife clattering upon the stones.
"Sarah!" Arman's voice tore through the silence, a roar of agony that seemed to shake the heavens themselves. She lifted trembling fingers to his cheek, her breath a vanishing thread. "I do not regret," she whispered. "Even a moment with you in life was worth eternity. Do not let my death be in vain. Remember me. Love me beyond the grave as I have loved you." Her hand fell. The light in her eyes dimmed. Armand clutched her body, the miracle of his return now mocked by the cruelty of fate. Daniel sank to his knees, sobbing, the enormity of his crime consuming him. And in that hour,
The streets knew a silence more terrible than thunder. When dawn came, Armand was gone. Some said he vanished with her last breath, returned to the shadow where love and death are wed. Others swore they saw him wandering the cemeteries, a man broken, seeking a grave that could bind what neither life nor death had conquered. As for Daniel, no tale could soften his fate. He lived, but his life was a prison of remorse without walls. Thus ended the tale, not with triumph, nor with the mercy of a happy ending, but with the truth that love, when torn between worlds, is a flame too fierce for mortal hands.